everyone. For those of you on the listening in, thank you so much for being part of this conversation around social and emotional health. Heather and Sandy, thank you so much for being willing to kick us off in these empathy huddles, like we're calling them. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to do very quick introductions. I'm Romina Lowry. I work with the empathy team, and
I'm Valentina Raman. I'm also on the empathy team.
And today we're going to have Heather Bryant, the Director of Innovation and Impact at Momentous, and Sandy Nobles, the Director of Education at Momentous Institute, which has been a changemaker school for the past 4 years.
Yep.
4 years. Present. As Valentina mentioned, a couple logistical issues. Just make sure your chatter box is correct, and you can chat and make notes and ask questions. We'll be checking that too. Other than that, welcome, and off to Heather and Sandy.
Thank you so much, Romina and Valentina. We're so happy to be here, and our plan for the day, for our time together, is that I'll kick us off and just give a little bit of background about what Momentous Institute is, and then Sandy's going to really take us on a deep dive into our lab school and what that looks like, and then we'll wrap up hopefully in time so that we can answer any questions or visit. We'd also love to know who else is listening in and learn from you as well. So we'll get started. We are Momentous Institute, and we are a 97-year-old nonprofit in Dallas, Texas. We have 3 branches of the work that we do here that you see on the slide that's on the screen now. We have, our oldest program is our therapeutic services program, and it's actually still our largest program. And that program serves about 5,500 low-income children and families a year in mental health services. Kind of runs the gamut, all different kinds of trauma, domestic violence, sexual abuse, anxiety, just a wide range of issues that our therapists treat. And it was in 1997 that our board decided that, you know, after 8 decades of working in the mental health space, they thought, you know, we're really good at this intervention model with mental health services, but we really want to get into the prevention space. And they felt like education was the way to do that. And so we think about the Momentous School as our furthest upstream mental health effort. We have taken everything that we learned from those 8 decades of working in mental health, and we use that to inform our work at the Momentous School. So, you know, what that looks like is everything is based on relationships. We work very closely with families, and we really look at kids and families in their context. And then about 4 years ago, the third part of our wheel that you see is our research and training arm. And that's what I'm currently leading up. The board has always been really clear that, you know, yes, our direct service work is extremely important, but we definitely want to make a larger impact nationally and even internationally. And so we're taking everything that we learn and research from our direct services and then share that out in our training. So because of our background, we're kind of working at this interdisciplinary place of mental health and education. Our kind of stake in the ground is social emotional health for all children. And the way that we define it is what you see here. Just the ability to understand and manage one's emotions, reactions, and relationships. And we know from our work, especially when you are working with kids and families who have that added stress of living in poverty. That toxic stress and trauma that sometimes comes with that really lends itself to kids that just need a lot of skill building in social emotional health. So what that looks like for us is this model that you see here. And this is how we at Momentous Institute sort of conceptualize social emotional health. So the first layer of it is safe relationships. We know from so much research and all of our years in mental health that the relationship is everything. And if you don't have that foundation, the rest of what you see on the screen is just noise. So we work really hard to develop close relationships with our students and families, and Sandy will talk more about that. And then the red rung that you see is self-regulation. So we find often that this is really where teachers have their most frustration with kids in their classes, is feeling like kids just don't have these self-regulation skills. So we think about those in terms of brain, breath, feelings, body, and impulse control. And then from there, we move on to awareness of self. And in that rung, we have characteristics like gratitude, optimism, grit, and resilience. And then from there, we go to understanding others, where we really spend a lot of time on perspective taking and empathy and actively build those skill sets for kids. And then the top rung of our model is change maker. And under change maker, we have the skills of kindness, compassion, and hope. So, you know, it looks like it's stair steps. It's not a linear process. Kids are moving in and out of many of these different levels at many different times. But we feel like this often gives teachers a framework of how they want to work with their children, as well as thinking about, you know, what skill building does the student that's in front of me really need? Our work is influenced by many different thinkers. We love Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. We have a pretty strong emphasis on mindfulness in the school that Sandy will talk a little bit about. So Susan Kaiser Greenland, Pat Jennings, and Nina Srinivas are all some of the thinkers that really influence the work that we do at the school. So I'm going to turn it over to Sandy now, and she will talk a little bit more in depth about what this looks like in our school.
So we work with 248 boys and girls from 3 years old through 5th grade. And this gives you just a glimpse into our 3-year-old classroom. And our student body it looks like our neighborhood in urban Dallas, about 94% Latino, about 4% African American. Our first indicator that we look at when we accept children in our school is if they qualify for free or reduced lunch. We are really targeting to work with a school population of children and families that wouldn't otherwise be able to access this kind of an environment, to build this kind of foundation for academic success and happiness in life. So we right now are at 86% of our kids qualify for free or reduced lunch. But you want to know, I know, about our key components that really make us stand out and make us different from other schools. But what I also want you to look for is how you see the work at the intersection of mental health and education, and how that's impacted what we do, and how that can really make a difference in how anybody functions in a school. I also know that starting with this foundation of relationships is where you need to be to understand why we feel a little bit different and look different. The relationships that we build with our families is very different, and we go about this in 2 distinct ways. We look at our within family engagement. That means how the family is interacting in the home around the relationship with their children and the relationship with their children in school, how they're partnering with us at school. And so this within family engagement is critical to how we work and begin working with families very differently. I'll mention between family engagement because that's the other piece that makes this partnership with families very different. Within family engagement, we're looking at our home visits. In our 3-year-old year, we actually have a licensed social worker that does home visits in the home every month. And so that changes how we're working with the family. It builds their sense of their capacity as their child's first teacher. It begins to open up for them the recognition of how they can connect school and home. Then how we continue working with our families is very different. All of our school events are non-traditional. We always work around the family when they're at school. A great example is our family nights that we do. Instead of a traditional open house, we're always looking for ways to tie content area to families working together. So our STEM nights are a perfect example, because what we do is we bring the families in, but they're working together as a family. You're not going to a 5th grade classroom or a 3rd grade classroom. You're coming in our auditorium and working with your family to design some kind of product together. One of our good example was the night we had families build a prosthetic hand, and it was just out of a bunch of stuff that we provided in a baggie, and they had to be able to clasp 5 things, and if they didn't, we were building in that sense of failure is a good thing, and they had to redesign in order to make their hand properly work. But this wasn't a class project, this was a family project. So these are just some examples of how we work, and our research is proving that this approach in engaging with families does have an outcome of academic success in school. So there's a triangle that's formed with the families that have high engagement within the home, then connect more with the other families at our school, and those are the kids in those families that score higher on academic tests in reading and math. And we can go more into that in the question and answer, because I know everybody always perks up when we can actually tie how we work with families to research that proves academic success.
And I'll just add one of the things about the within family engagement. We work really hard for parents to feel like they have an authentic voice within the school. You know, those initial home visits, every child gets a home visit before school starts. And the only agenda item for that home visit is to build a relationship with that family. There's no policies and procedures, which as a teacher, I know it's really hard to hold back from that. But, you know, the most important question teachers ask at that home visit is, what would you like me to know about your child? I think so often we just jump right into the school year and we never even ask parents that question. We also have our parents develop a vision statement for their child. That happens in our 3-year-old visit that Monica does with our families, and we ask families to think long term. What kind of adult do you want your child to become? And then, you know, what they write really becomes our North Star, because every parent has such hopes and dreams for their child, and we want to be clear with parents that those are our dreams as well, and we're going to partner with you to make that happen.
The pictures that you're seeing on the between family engagement slide are important to note, because you're like, well, those aren't inside doing anything. Those are actually very informal between family activities that our teachers do just right after school. And one of them is a picnic that was a Saturday morning. But these events don't have to be a big production. So a 3rd grade class might have author's chair afternoon, and instead of taking the kids out for pickup, any of the families that are there to pick their children up, they come in to pick them up, stay 20 minutes in the classroom, have a cookie, and a glass of water and hear their kids read, and then off they go. But what we're doing is we're bringing families together in the room so they're beginning to know each other. So it's not just about the kids building relationships with each other, it's about the adults building relationships with each other. That's where you get your payoff long term.
There's a question about how receptive are our parents to these at-home visits. And
Great question.
Yeah, it is a great question. And I would say they're overwhelmingly positive about it. And part of that is because of the way we approach it. We make it very clear that this visit is really all about your child. We're not there in any sort of evaluative way. I think we occasionally will have a family that's not so up for it, and we just invite them to come do the visit at school. And then there was another question about standardized testing, and yes, we are a private nonprofit school, so we are not required to take the standardized tests, but we take the state tests for Texas. We approach it very differently. We don't do a lot of sort of drill and kill for that test, but we want those scores because we want that comparison. And we also do the national MAP testing that happens 3 times a year, Sandy. So we also use that as well.
So we have norm referenced data, and we also have criterion referenced data. So you all are asking the great questions. I love this. Going straight at what schools need to know. To also add on Heather about home visits and families being receptive, when we work with a public school that wants to start doing home visits, we work with them on how they build that trust first. That is a tricky space to be in if you're making an abrupt change in the school culture. And so it can be thought of in many different ways. Open houses at the beginning of the year being a little bit different, going at the relationship building versus the let me tell you what school's going to be like. I do want to move on and get into the nuts and bolts of what the day looks like. And I know good questions are going to come up, but I think I'm getting ready to answer some of them. So for just what a day looks like for teachers and kids and families in our school, these daily routines and procedures are going to kind of capsulize for you the easiest way we integrate our student-focused approach. All that we do in building these relationships is all about allowing a student to feel like they're heard in their school and in their classroom, they're felt and they're valued. And so we begin every day with a school-wide morning meeting. It's not a big deal. The kids lead it. We say our pledges together. They go over the menu for the day in the cafeteria. They may share, a grade level may share something that is exciting that's happening with them. We may do some reflection in the morning on a big whiteboard, but we always end together by breathing together as a whole school. And that's one of our mindfulness practices, and you're going to hear me talking about mindfulness practices throughout what our day looks like. A lot of our mindfulness practices are woven into our classroom morning meetings and our closing circles, because those are those times in the day where you can focus your attention on really connecting with everybody in the room. And these are important components of how we begin a day and we close a day together. These are the ways that you're going to build a classroom community in the most genuine way and actually the quickest way. Our mindfulness practices really come with our focus on self-awareness and then building into that awareness of others that was in our social emotional health model. And in order to become aware of yourself, you've got to be able to learn how to focus. And these are skills that anybody needs to be taught. But we know in environments where kiddos are growing up in poverty, these practices are very important because they're not coming to us with much knowledge about how to manage their emotions or how they get along with others around them. So those self-regulation strategies are a part of these mindfulness practices that we talk about. Our breath is how we really focus the most during the day, so that kids learn how to use their breath and their awareness of themselves and their emotions throughout the day. We'll talk more specifically about these, some of the resources that you may want to know about right away. Susan Kaiser Greenland's latest publication is Mindful Games, and it's a great way to quickly understand how you can use breathing practices that can fit into any classroom easily, and they're fun for kids. We're going to always go back to this building relationships as our foundation. And what I want to talk next about is how our teaching and learning environments are built on engagement and really shared responsibility. What we want to do is really have you leave with this sense of how we flip kind of a traditional classroom so that the kids are really driving what happens. This is just an example in our 5th grade of the class agreements that almost every teacher uses. So you're going to develop together how you want your classroom to operate. And so the kids' voice is the most important in the room. But what you'll see is also the teacher agreements. So the kids have also expressed what they expect of their teacher. This is a pretty big component of how we operate and how we think that is different. And we can talk more about this later. We've even written our school handbook this way so that everything's flipped. So parents have expectations of school, not just school having expectations of parents. Another component that you're going to see a lot of in our examples of just pictures around our school is this whole focus on the brain. So the influence of neuroscience and what we're learning is has such an impact on education, but it's become our hook with our kids. And this is the one piece that if I went back to public schools, this is what I know would make a difference. So I was in public schools for almost 30 years before coming here, and this is the piece that was missing. I was in schools where we were great at building community, but having an understanding for a child of how their brain works is that lever of control that they've never sensed that they had before. So our 3-year-olds can tell you about their amygdala, their prefrontal cortex, and their hippocampus. And those are the parts of the brain that they can understand, so that then they get the connection between an emotion that gets big and how their amygdala gets hijacked. And they have to focus and bring some control of those emotions in order to make a good decision and think about consequences in their prefrontal cortex. These slides are about our 5th graders because they even actually write their goals at the beginning of the year based on brain development. So this connection of learning about your brain, that's a big deal for kids, and they love it. And it's also a way for them to connect when we need to redirect, for them to be like, okay, I know I've got to do this. I've got to get my amygdala back down online. I've got to settle my glitter. That's another way that we talk about it all the time. These are great examples of kids in brain hats, which is a whole nother layer. But this is a way for kids to identify these skills that they're learning about self-awareness and awareness of others, but this is taking you into that growth mindset piece as well. We teach optimism, we teach gratitude, hope, resiliency, all of these things. Once kids understand them, they begin to think about them differently, and it makes how they get along with others and how they look at what they're faced with in school and out of school very differently. We've got tons of examples of how our teachers build in a growth mindset. These are just some of them. We also really focus on grappling with content. And so you'll see signs like this. Did you embrace struggle today? It's all so that we're keeping this sense of growth mindset just awake for everybody. You're going to see examples like this in every nook and cranny of our school. And even on this next slide, it's all about explicitly talking and learning about optimism. It's talking about resiliency, and it's developing that sense of hope. And all of these are the things that we've been doing and doing pretty well. And it's what has developed some skills and a foundation for our kids that are launching them successfully after they leave us. But it's also helping us bridge our work as an Ashoka Changemaker school. So these are the skills that make you a change maker. And what we're really working towards now is our students and their ability to identify themselves and their own story as a change maker story. We're even moving into bringing in people that they know and look up to. This is just a great example. So I don't know how old you are, but Pudge Rodriguez was a big deal baseball player, certainly in Texas, in the 90s, and he's getting ready to go into the Hall of Fame. This is a very long story, but what happened was he was coming to visit school, and so what I asked him to do was not just come and say hi to kids and, you know, and give them an autograph, but to tell his story as a change maker. And so we ended up with this phenomenal artwork that is his story of coming from Puerto Rico, how his parents shaped him, how his experiences shaped him to who he is today. And so we believe that this bridge of us explicitly telling stories as change makers is going to really be cool in the next couple of years. In fact, for the last couple of years, we have had our 5th graders identify themselves as a change maker. And these are slides of work in progress, but our kiddos build a sculpture of themselves and what they hope for comes next in their life. So they have a big graduation ceremony and they tell their story as a change maker. We've got one sculpture that's about finished. She's going to be a teacher. We've got a soccer player. In the middle, you see an architect, and I love the hashtag in the last one. So Lorenzo is going to work in technology and have some websites, so he's starting his own hashtag. So this is just a way for us to be looking at these skills of optimism, this forward thinking that we're developing with our kids, this sense of resiliency. What do you do when you grapple with struggle, and how do you keep going, that persistence, and then that sense of hope, because these are those components that we know create success. And I want you to just see some of our data. The interesting thing about our school is we track our kids after they leave us, and our research has shown that empathy is the strongest predictor for academic success. And we also know that then you're also going to have a chance for access and opportunity, and you end up being a happier person. What you're seeing in front of you are some of the places that we look at the academic success of our kids. So they leave us after 5th grade. Our 6th graders through 12th graders last year were in 60 different schools. So they don't have to go one place to stay successful. And so you'll see in that first column, that's our Algebra 1 end of course exam. It's the state level exam. And we consider that, of course, a gateway math course, and 100% of our kids are passing that test, and we're at 6 years now where every one of our former students has passed this Algebra 1 state assessment. We're the green bar compared to our state economically disadvantaged in the purple, the light purple, and then the dark purple or blue is our state non-economically disadvantaged students. So I'm hoping that makes sense.
So we've closed that achievement gap, and then in the case of that end of course, we've actually flipped it. And I think too, like, and Sandy will go through the other data points up here, but I think one of the things that teachers say is, yeah, we know social emotional health is really important, but I have to get the kids ready for the test, and I don't have, where am I going to fit it in, and I don't have time for it. And so what we're saying is, it's not an either or, it's a both and when you're playing the long game, which from the time that the school was set up, we always knew that we would follow our kids long term, then you see that even though our kids leave us after 5th grade, some of them go into great schools, some of them go into schools that are not so great, not great at all. But we believe that this strong foundation of social emotional health really acts as a buffer for them. And so it doesn't, what you see is, doesn't matter where our kids go to school, they tend to be successful. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's great. And I think some of the others are pretty self-explanatory, but we do look at our high school graduation rate, and that's a graduation rate on time. And so right now we're at 98% are graduating on time. And you can see compared to the state, our state graduation rate has increased in the last couple of years, so we're pretty proud of that as a state, but ours is still really, really high. Our college ready rate, and these are, our kids compared with everybody else, just like every school is looking at college ready, and our percentage isn't that high. It's 26%, but then you look at their enrollment rate, they're going to college at a much higher percentage than certainly their peers, but also even across our state. But their persistence rate is what we really are looking at. And so right now our persistence rate, that's that continuation from freshman year to sophomore year, is at 81%. But in the last 5 years, it's been as high as 92%. So what our kids leave with, that foundation in social emotional health, is that buffer. It's giving them that ability to just stick with it, even when it is a struggle.
So what this map shows you is, our efforts to, we call it expand our reach. We feel like we've got a pretty interesting model here. And so with our charge from the board to impact children that we will never serve directly, we're really investing in research and training in a very targeted way now. So what you see on the map is, last year we trained about 10,450 professionals, educators and clinicians. And so if you do pretty conservative math, that means those folks worked with over 100,000 kids. And so you can see kind of where we go to do training and where people come from around the country to visit us for training. One of the places that folks often come to is this Changing the Odds conference. And this is our lineup for this upcoming year. We host this conference. It's a 2-day conference each fall, and would love for any of you to join us that are interested. But we feel like we kind of want to pull educators, clinicians, decision makers up to that 50,000 foot level. about what is really going to change the odds for kids. And so each year we invite speakers. We keep everybody in the room for 2 days. It's just keynote after keynote, TED Talks on steroids. This year, Ashoka Fellow Tomas Alvarez will be joining us, so we're very excited about that. And that conference seems to be getting quite a bit of traction, so that's exciting. We also have a blog. If you go to the Momentous Institute website, every week we put up a new strategy, and you see the different categories on the right side. So these are strategies from both our teachers, partners that we work with, as well as our mental health clinicians. And we also have created some free apps. This one is called Settle Your Glitter. They're available in the iTunes App Store or Google Play. And I'll see if I can get this little video to play.
Settle Your Glitter is about when you're angry or mad or really worried and you have to shake it up and down. Let's try mindful breathing, and then you have to breathe with the puffer fish. If you still don't feel happy, you could do it again. I'll just use it and then I'll calm myself down. Now that I've settled my glitter, I feel a little much better.
That's Daniela. She was in 1st grade when we shot that. We love that because we want everyone to feel a little much better. This is the second app. It's called Breathing Bubbles, and this is Francisco explaining how to use it.
This app is Breathing Bubbles. Let's say that I'm sad. What do you want to do? Release a worry or receive a joy? I'm gonna release a worry. Fill the bubble with a worry that you want to release. Stop being sad. Watch that bubble float away until it disappears, and then I start breathing. I will calm myself down and go back to class.
And then just finally, just some different ways to stay in touch with us. Our website, we're actually in the process of a redo on the website, but you can find our blog there. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and really if you go to YouTube, we have the Momentous Institute channel. There are tons of videos of all kinds of things, of the way that we are working with our kids. And we also have 4 new videos. One is a pretty extensive tour of the school. That I might, Romina, I might send you those links, and maybe afterwards you could send out those videos if folks are interested. So that's kind of it. I thought that what we could do now is get all these pictures off. Claudia, oh, there we go. And just maybe open up for questions. And in the chat box, I see that there's one request for us to talk a little bit more about the training teachers receive to recognize mental health issues and those that need intervention. And that's a great question. So when we do our training, our model is to send an educator as well as a mental health clinician together. Because we want both voices in the room. And in our training, we spend quite a bit of time on trauma, how to recognize trauma, how does trauma show up in the classroom, and also how to think about trauma in a different way. So often what looks like misbehavior or defiance is actually a kid who is flooded in a fight, flight, or freeze state, and that's coming from trauma. And so, you know, the way that we've traditionally been trained kind of with this carrot stick behavior management systems that we use, that often just exacerbates the trauma for kids. So when teachers, we'll talk quite a bit about attachment and the different styles of attachment, and what implications are for that in the classroom, as well as people being aware of their own attachment history and how their own attachment issues can sometimes get triggered by the way kids are acting in the class. So, we also talk about, what happens in kids' brains when they get in that amygdala hijack. And you can't reason with a kid who's in the middle of an amygdala hijack, who's in the middle of a meltdown. So it's really just trying to shift that perspective for teachers on how they see misbehavior, and then we give them lots of strategies to use to try to intervene with that. And I think, Sandy, do you want to just talk about, as a principal, like how you sort of talk to our teachers about discipline?
Sure. And one of the examples that came up in my mind while Heather was talking was that one of the strategies that I use with a child that I have out of a classroom that's dysregulated is I always walk without words first. So it's important to remember that movement is going to help any child. We have a texture wall in our building, and I worked with a kindergartner this year that was totally dysregulated, really upset, almost hyperventilating, and walking up and down that texture wall gave them a different experience so that they were able to calm down, but we weren't saying anything. So there are lots of different ways to work with kids individually that I've learned through our connections with mental health that have really helped. We also work with teachers very differently. Anything that happens is going to be done on a case-by-case basis. We don't have any school-wide discipline, processes, certainly not plans, because we really want to go at this as what is going on in context. And so we also, because of that, have very little discipline issues to deal with. Because our kids feel connected in their classrooms, they feel valued and they feel heard, things just aren't going to bubble up the same as they do when you're trying to get everybody to conform and comply. One question has come up about parents being receptive to the home connections, not just the home visits. And that kind of goes along with this. So families have to also see that we're going to deal with their child differently, but also everybody else's children. And one of the things that I think is important for you to know about our school is our families are self-selecting in. So that changes the dynamics of a school community, and we understand that. We also basically don't have a mobility rate. For an urban school, that's just a dream. Over 50%, almost 60% of our fifth graders this year have been together since they were 3. So that's 8 years. That's everybody, and each other's families. So we recognize that makes a big difference. When I work with public school principals, one of the things that we always talk about is how to reduce mobility, because that will strengthen the culture of your school. Mm-hmm. Another question goes back to those standardized tests, and how do we deal with them? Heather talked a little bit about, we are trying to live that school that can show that if you engage kids in learning, that they will be able to perform on any assessment given. And so it's that whole standards-based approach. We use a standards-based reporting system. And we do that so that we're targeting what boys and girls are intended to learn at a grade level. So we're building our curriculum and our learning experiences around those standards, knowing that if they understand and have a deep mastery of the standard, they're going to be able to perform on any assessment. Does it always work? No. So we had the same pressures and stress of standardized tests as most schools, we don't have that pressure of high accountability that many of you work under. Yes, we want to do well, but nobody's paycheck depends on a standardized test report. What we want to do, and what I think partner schools that are in public systems get from us when they work with us, is they do see that it is possible. And there's not a teacher on the planet that doesn't think, if I could teach it, they will learn it and they will be able to get it and take me out of these constraints of a schedule and all of the different benchmarks. And so we just are a place to see it in action, that you can go at teaching each child what they need to learn to close their gaps, and to then take off and master what they need to learn at a particular grade level. Hope that helps. So
Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions or thoughts, or anything you want to share about how you're working with social emotional health in your context?
we have our question lady over here.
I just noticed that you and I look a lot alike.
I know. It's like, yeah, our hair, yeah, it is kind of disturbing.
Okay. Romina, Valentina, anything else on your end that you'd like us to talk about?
That you feel like we've missed?
No, I would urge everyone else. I just added another question that's on my mind on the chat. And then I would just urge the other participants to please send your questions either on the chat or on the question box. You can sort of ask. Oh, I see another 2 questions coming up.
Yeah, okay. So about the heartfulness, relaxation, and meditation at our school, do you incorporate meditation? We do. It's, you know, our kids are young, but we do focus breathing with them 3 times a day. We use a variety of different tools and ways to do that. Sometimes they're listening to a chime. Sometimes we'll do a body scan. Sometimes they're watching a Hoberman sphere, you know, contract and go get bigger and match their breath to that. With our very littlest kids, our 3-year-olds, we have them lay down and put a Beanie Baby on their belly and, you know, breathe in and out and watch the Beanie Baby move up and down. So we do quite a bit of it, as well as, did I say body scan? Mm-hmm. Yeah, things like that. So yeah, and you know, I think what's interesting about doing that work with kids is, you know, I think it's much easier for kids actually than for adults. And kids pretty quickly fall right into it. And I've also noticed that it's often the kids that are the most dysregulated, that if you miss one of those breathing breaks, they'll be the ones to say, I think we need to do some breathing. So, you know, I think the kids, they recognize that they need that to settle themselves down.
Now, sometimes when they're dysregulated, they might, like if they see me, they're like, you're just going to have me breathe, you know? And so you know, they are children. One of the things that I often talk to principals about is with older kids that might be resistant and, you know, be dysregulated in a state of it's not fair. What I often use is a basketball, and so I will just toss the basketball and say dribble or toss it back to me, and so that you've got this motion that will get them to where they're repeating a motion, and then they're actually breathing and becoming more focused and settled on their own without me looking at them and saying, take, you know, 5 breaths. So there are ways to get around it that make sense for kids, especially older kids. I will go back to that whole movement. I'll have fifth grade boy that's upset walk in the gym. I mean, we'll just walk and no words and just walk those laps. And I may change the pace. I'll go faster. I'll go slower, just to get that movement going so that then they're able to have some repetition so that they can come down enough to where you hear their voice. They just need to be heard, and then they're usually in a better problem solving space.
Sandy, there's a question about how about whole community support and how do you support teachers?
Great question. So the practices that we use with the kids, we also use as the adults. So building relationships with our students and our families are key to, I think, the outcomes that we see. But it's also key to how we work together. So one of our core values is collaboration, but we live it. And our teachers have to also live it. So there's a lot of focus on activities and just time to reflect together. And anytime we're together, we also do core breathing. We make sure we're using our strategies that we're using in our classrooms. So all of those things make for a very different kind of faculty relationship. Not that different from any school that's got a healthy culture where you're really collaborating and it's a priority. It's just got a little bit of a twist. A lot of our teachers have developed over time a personal practice. Some would talk more about it as meditation. Some would just talk about it as alone time. Some even talk about it as prayer. So it's not anything that we define. It's just something that they know it works in their classrooms, and so they also know that it's going to work for them personally. Coming out of public school and knowing about implementation of anything, and knowing that the system is dynamic and people are coming and going all the time, I understand that it's a very difficult thing to think about training or even building awareness of meditative practices and the benefits with a faculty. And so you have to figure out ways to train enough for implementation that's pure and is meaningful and genuine for kids. But what happens is when you're doing that, teachers are like, oh my gosh, every time we stop to breathe, I actually do better after we've taken this break. So these brain breaks become important for the teachers because they know it works for them as much as it does for their kids.
We also, our kids are released at 1 o'clock every Wednesday. And so from 1 to 4 is professional development for teachers. And I think that's really a time for, the staff to come together and do not only some new learning, but also problem solving together as a team. And Sandy's actually puts teachers in tribes. And so they are with that particular tribe all year long. And that tribe is really a strong support system for each other.
It's based off of a model of a professional learning community. So it's that PLC concept, but it goes a little bit, not further, because you're looking at academics, but you're looking at it in a foundation of social emotional health. And so you're building relationships with each other so that you're a better practitioner in your classroom.
And then I think there's one question: how do you deal with cultural, racial diversity in this work with the communities? Yeah, that's a great question. And our kids here were not very heterogeneous in our racial makeup, and so we've made real concerted efforts to work with schools that look different than ours in the community. And we learn as much from them as they learn from us. We've got you know, I think as an agency, we're moving towards this work in social justice and racial healing. We're doing some really specific things in the Dallas area as an agency, and that also informs how we go out and do this work with other schools and kids. So, you know, I think what doesn't change across communities is relationship. And so how you go about building that strong relationship, everyone needs that. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, you need that safe and secure relationship. And so we are really intentional about how we go into other communities and are very open and transparent, and always go in with the attitude of, we have so much to learn from you, and you know, we have some things to share too, but we always come in with the posture of a learner.
This is an area of focus for us, and we know it's a challenge for us. What we're doing internally, I think, because we explicitly teach these social emotional health skills to our children, the sense of optimism, gratitude, perspective taking is a big one. Perspective taking is a big step before empathy and compassion. And that practice is what allows our children just an opportunity to step back and look at somebody else's thinking. And so in classes and in any content area class, that's one of the easiest ways for teachers to integrate social emotional health lessons into content areas, is that perspective taking. Even in math class, you know, it's that whole sense of you can solve the problem more than one way. And so then the teacher can facilitate that conversation between kids of look at how someone else is thinking. So it's that whole idea of that metacognition. It's that, you know, really be able to explain your thinking and listen to somebody else's thinking. And so even though we struggle with racial diversity, we really are building this foundation, hopefully, with our kids of even just a diversity in thinking. And so we hope that then that is one of the skills that takes them into a new school environment where everybody's not going to look like them anymore. Mm-hmm. And so it's one of the areas that we feel like helps us and helps our kids, even though we know it's a huge area of growth for us.
And I see that it's 3 o'clock now. Romina, what do you think? Should we bring things to a close? I want to be respectful of people's time, or?